Here we go. Just setting ourselves in the right direction. This one just the that's right. The one below. The second one. So we're just thinking we're relying on the Buddha, his Dharma, until it's saying the first one. I'll do it in my words in English the first time around. So we're saying until we are enlightened, we are going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then the second line, the two lines, we're expressing our motivation for listening to these teachings together. And so by all the virtuous karma that we create by being here together to listen to these teachings, may we become a Buddha. So in the end, we're able to benefit all sentient beings. We'll sing it 2 times in Tibetan. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyapsuchi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyapsuchi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog. Okay, thanks, Shanti. So, so what we covered, did Shanti, I don't remember, did we cover everything?
We were on the middle scope.
Oh, we haven't even finished the last one yet. We didn't even go to the last scope yet.
I think we just started the great scope.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks for reminding me. Oh my goodness. So we get on to the great scope. Okay then. Okay, good. Now we see. All right, let's go over, reiterate the last point so we move into this and know where we're coming from. This is perfect. Okay, so let's just do the whole summary of the whole thing so we know where we're coming from. So here we are, we're on the path. The very first thing we think about, we understand, is that our mind, Lama Zopa, especially when he first started teaching the lamrim for Westerners who've never heard of reincarnation and karma, it was a brand new idea to us. I mean, Indians have been, you're the ones who observed all this thousands of years ago. So, it's very important to understand what the mind is. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche would always start with how mind is not physical, mind is beginningless, and so we start to at least understand what it is that becomes a Buddha, that enters into this path, this non-physical, beginningless continuity of mental moments known as our mind. And then, of course, then we think, and then we hear that we've got this potential, The end result of this whole path is, if you like, to graduate. This whole course, this lamrim, this course, we graduate as a Buddha, So the thing that we then first contemplate, this is coming from Atisha, he wants to prime our minds to be ready to practice. He gets us to think about the preciousness of this life. And that's something we don't think about. Because we're kind of often miserable and caught up in our unhappiness and everything's going wrong, we don't ever think that, to count, sort of to do some, just to check up and realize that we're actually, in one sense, we're actually part of the 0.01% of all beings, fortunate beings, not rich, but fortunate. We've got reasonable health, reasonable wealth, reasonable sanity, reasonable conditions, all of these together, plus a wish to practice a spiritual path. All of this together is like a miracle. Getting all these conditions together is like a miracle. So the action point here from Atisha and Tzong Khapa is don't waste it. So then we enter into the path, and then Atisha and Tzong Khapa, they increase our wish not to waste this precious life. But then we think about in depth, we think about impermanence. Buddha's teaching is about impermanence. But in particular, Buddha gets us right between the eyeballs. He doesn't just talk about subtle impermanence, which is an amazing philosophy and very subtle and very fascinating. But he talks about death. Because he wants us, death is a marvelous example of impermanence. The general teaching is impermanence, but his particular agenda here, Tzong Khapa and Atisha, is to increase our wake-up call, not to waste this precious life, because it's going to end at any moment, and we don't know when. So the next thing he gets us to think about, and again, he's increasing our sense of urgency not to waste this precious life. We realize we could have all sorts of unhappy rebirths. So we learn about the suffering of the lower realms, which for many of us, of course, is something we don't want to think about. And the reason he's here, the reason it's here, because he wants to increase our sense of urgency. This life is precious. It can end at any moment. Look at the possibilities of types of rebirths when we do die. So then we think, well, whom can I turn to? Whom can I turn to give me methods to prevent this suffering? So we think, well, the Buddha, here we are, our doctor is the Buddha. We turn to the Buddha. We rely upon the Buddha. So here we talk about refuge, what the Buddha is, the 3 jewels, blah, 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 Now, the next step, this leads us to the next step where we actually begin to practice. This is where we start to practice. And this is the culmination of this first scope. And that is we abide by the laws of karma. Here it is, we learn about this natural law that runs the universe, that Buddha has observed, that the amazing thing is before the Buddha has observed, the mind is driven by this law. Everything we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind that produces our future. We're our own creator. His Holiness calls it self-creation. It's a great way to put it. So then what we're doing there is, because we don't want future suffering, and the Buddha's point is very simple. You want to be happy in the future? Well, you've got to create the causes. You don't want to not suffer? You've got to create the causes. You want to be healthy in the future? Well, you've got to create the causes by don't eat sugar, don't smoke cigarettes now. Buddha is saying karma's like that. So when you don't want future suffering, that's what should energize us. That energizes the first scope, the wish not to suffer. Not someone else's suffering, our own suffering. We've got to really know our own suffering first, which is what we don't like to think about. So then we abide by the laws of karma. We live in vows and we do purification every day. And then if we live a life like that, we can guarantee we'll get a decent human rebirth and keep on moving on our spiritual path. But we can go further. We can do more. So we go to the middle scope, or high school, as I call it. We now get to the root of the problem, which is our mind. We learn about the delusions. We unpack and unravel our mind. This is Buddha's expertise. This is something that's unique to the Buddhist approach, the way he sees the mind and how the mind functions, and how what's in our mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering. These words are simple, but what it refers to is pretty intense for us because we think exactly the opposite. So in this way, we learn to give up attachment. So the summary of these two scopes, this is the wisdom wing. If we were on the Theravadan path, we would cease here. We'd graduate here. We'd then realize emptiness. We'd achieve nirvana in one life or other. We'd cut all the delusions, and then we would disappear and not come back. But we're on the Mahayana path, so we go further. We can go further. We can get out of samsara at this point. But no, we go further because we look around. Once we've seen our suffering, once we've understood karma and the delusions, we realize we're all in the same boat. Everybody's suffering. Everybody thinks someone else is suffering. Everybody thinks someone else is the cause of my suffering. We don't realize it's ourselves. So now we move into the compassion wing. We realize, how can I leave everybody behind? Not possible. So we continue to work on our minds. This never changes. So this whole first level of practice, it's called the practice of the morality of restraint. We're refraining from harming others. This is huge. And this is embodied in the Pratimoksha vows. The vows of not killing, not stealing, not lying, and so on, So we're harnessing our body, speech, and mind. And Buddha here, this statue of Buddha in this aspect, he's the manifestation of this level of practice, completely subduing body, speech, and mind, totally in control of body, speech, and mind. So, and it might when we say disciplining and control, it sounds a bit depressing. No, how would you be by now? You'd be joyful because you've got renunciation. You're an amazing person. In control of your body, speech, and mind is effortless. You're joyful, you're content, you're fulfilled. And your compassion is growing. You're seeing others. So here is the morality of restraint, refraining from harming others. So we continue this into the next level of bodhisattvas, but the emphasis for refraining from harming others is different now. So the beginning is to stop harming ourselves. Here, it's more broad. It's more marvelous. It's to help us break down the barriers that delusions have created between self and other, because we're trying to learn. Now the next phase of our practice is to cultivate bodhicitta. First is renunciation, which is the first and second scopes. You control your body, you control your speech, you control your mind. You completely understand suffering, and you are up to here with suffering. You're fed up with suffering. You're sick of suffering. You've got to know your own suffering. Often when we see suffering, we hear about the Four Noble Truths, we think of the people out there suffering. We'll know our own first. Don't ever underestimate this. And that drives us to realize everybody's in the same boat. And now I know what suffering is. I know what the causes are. Now you want to continue to practice, continue working on your mind to develop this outrageous, amazing attitude called bodhicitta. So there are two main methods that are taught in the lamrim. One is called the 7 point something, I think. The other one is this more radical approach. That is low, they call it lojong, all under in this general heading of mind training, a whole genre of practices and teachings. And so there's a combination of these that consist of 11 different points. And the culmination, the 11th, is the accomplishment of bodhicitta. Babongka Rinpoche mentions this in the lamrim. He goes through it. So let's touch on these briefly. And then once we've achieved bodhicitta, final stage of practice having achieved bodhicitta is now to practice to perfect our mind and become a Buddha by practicing the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. The first 4, we're moving from life to life to life as a bodhisattva, perfecting the first 4 in relation to sentient beings. And now it becomes not only the practice of the morality of restraint. Up until now, it's all of this. Now we're practicing the ethics of benefiting others. And then finally, we practice the last 2, which is the perfection of the wisdom wing, and in our meditation, concentration, and the realization of emptiness. So once we've accomplished all that, then Buddhahood is the result on this course to Buddhahood. So let's look at how we accomplish bodhicitta. So bodhicitta, first of all, is not the same as love and compassion. It's the result of love and compassion. The essence of all the virtuous qualities, the essence of them is love and compassion. Even they summarize it as compassion, compassion. And the culmination of this is this outrageous attitude called bodhicitta that is actually, it's got 2 parts. The first part is this: once you've got bodhicitta, there is only the thought to benefit others. Once you've got bodhicitta, there's no longer the normal thought of I. This is hard to imagine. I mean, you know your I. You're not stupid. You don't not use the word I, but you don't have that same intense feeling of this poor me, unhappy me, difficult struggles, dramas, that usual me, trying to make me happy, trying to get enough time to do this and do that for me, always that unhappiness and sadness we have. That's gone for the bodhisattvas. It's outrageous. They only now know they exist for others. It's their job description. So the first part of bodhicitta is to never stop helping whoever's in front of you, the ant, the dog, whoever it might be. It's your job, like they're all your children and you're the mother. You don't have a choice. But the second part, the long-term part of bodhicitta is this sense of incredible urgency to never give up doing this work. And doing that work, you're moving towards your Buddhahood. So to become as Buddha as quickly as possible, to never give up on this work, so that you finally, the result of it is your own Buddhahood, because then you're totally qualified. You're thoroughly qualified. No delusions left, no obstacles left. You see the minds of beings perfectly. You know exactly how to help them, and you will never give up for as long as time exists. So it's this extraordinary attitude. I mean, when you read the qualities of a bodhisattva, it doesn't, there's no equivalent. It's very simple. There's no equivalent in ordinary modern life. There's no equivalent in psychology or neuroscience. Yes, certainly in religion there is. And that's why we like to put it on a pedestal. But this is Buddhist psychology. Don't put it away from the mind. Don't put it separate from life. Buddha's telling us that we can all accomplish this. This is the potential of every single one of us. Everybody possesses Buddha nature. It's something really fundamental. So the starting point, these 11 different points, there are 11 points. Like bullet points, which are summarizing the different steps, the different practices. Each is quite precise. When we talk about meditating on compassion, we get very vague and wishy-washy about it. But these are stages of development of your mind. People spend years of retreat in accomplishing each of these stages. This one leads to this, which leads to that. It's very precise, So the first one, the foundation. Once we understand this one, the rest makes sense. Without understanding this one, it doesn't make sense how we can have love and compassion for everybody. It seems too grand and vague, The first one, the foundation upon which everything else is built, and thus the development of bodhicitta can be accomplished, is to develop equanimity. This is huge, actually, but we get very vague about what it is. Oh, everyone's equal. Well, be more precise. In what sense? What do we mean by it, The word equanimity is used in different ways. When we've got to some degree of renunciation from the middle scope and the junior school, the lower scope and middle scope, when we've got some sense of equanimity, the word here is used in a different way. That's referring to our own mind. And because you've stabilized your body, speech, and mind, you've got more equanimity. You're more steady in yourself. You're much more content and fulfilled and stable, not up and down like a yo-yo. That's the equanimity then. Here, it's different. The equanimity here is referring to a very, a precise, a very clear attitude. This equanimity is relation to others. So when you've got this equanimity, what it is, and this is my words, this is my way of defining it. What it is this heartfelt recognition. that friend, enemy, and stranger are equal to each other from one point of view. They're equal from many points of view, and they're not equal from many points of view, but it's a really specific point. They're equal to each other from one point of view. Each of them only wants happiness, and each of them only doesn't want to suffer. So why these two here? It's very logical, because what is love? We're trying to develop love and compassion for every being. So what is love? It's defined as a thought. It starts with a thought. May you be happy. What is compassion? May you not suffer. So right now, having the delusions and dividing the universe into these three categories, friend, enemy, stranger, it's only three categories. Because why? Because we're driven by the three poisons, which is Buddha's view of the mind, and all beings in the universe, all the animals, all the other beings are all within this same kind of model of the mind. We've all got, because we have ego grasping, we have these delusions. So we have intense attachment to get only the nice things. So in terms of beings, that's called a friend. Then on top of that, because when the friend does what your attachment wants, your beloved, they fulfill your needs, then of course you're prepared to have love and compassion for them. But why? What's the logic of ego? The logic of why I want you to be happy right now, being an ordinary person, is because you make me happy. That's the logic. My love is contingent upon you doing what my attachment wants. It sounds brutal, but when we analyze our minds, that's exactly how it works. That's why when, the husband gives me up for a younger version, overnight, the love turns off like a tap. The compassion turns off like a tap. He goes from the friend enemy to the category to the enemy category. So who's an enemy? Enemy, we mightn't use that word. It's the label for a person or a being who proactively doesn't do what my attachment wants. So they make me angry. They hurt me. This is real. They do hurt me. But that becomes the reason, the logic I use for not wanting them to be happy, for not caring if they suffer. So the way we do have love and compassion now, I do want some people to be happy. I do want some people not to suffer, but it's only the first group, pretty much. Normal world. Have a look at the normal world, So we're trying to shift that logic. It's not logic. It's ego's logic. It's not logic at all. It's completely self-centered. But what we're trying to shift to is to realize that everybody wants to be happy and everybody doesn't want to suffer. And that becomes the reason for why now I want them to be happy and I want them to not suffer. It shifts the reasoning from my developing love and compassion. So if I don't analyze this and I don't have equanimity, I will only want my friends to be happy, and I only care if they suffer, That's how the world is. So the third category, who are they? We call them strangers. And what is a stranger? This is very clear. It's a person who's neither harmed nor helped me. So how do we feel about them? Well, it's obvious. We don't care. I mean, it sounds brutal how I say things, but listen to it, look at it, observe our own mind, observe the world. The universe sees the world like this. Every being has friends, enemies, and strangers. We ought to question it, but we don't. It's so fundamental. It's so normal. We just think it's the normal world, and we don't question. Buddha questions it. He analyzes. He sees it. So we have to break that down. It's not logical. It's totally self-centered. So how do you do this? Well, even as we're talking, just talking about it, these are sort of containing some of the reasons we'd use in our own mind, in our meditation, to break down these misconceptions that we have and try to show how it is true that the enemy, friend, and stranger are equal to each other in wishing not to be happy, wishing not to suffer, and to be happy. But it's intensely difficult. We don't want to think that. So in other words, what we're trying to do when you do this meditation, and we can think of it even as we're doing this, have three people in front of you. To the left, your beloved. Right in front of you, a person who doesn't like you. And everybody here, everybody on the planet has people who are mean to them. Look at the animals, my God, but look at humans. People at work, the family, every single being has some enemies. People whom we don't like, who've harmed us. This is because we're all in samsara. This is how it is, We mightn't call them enemies, but it's a good label for the objects of our aversion, even our anger. So have in front of you right now, as we're talking, a beloved to the left whom you do adore. And right in front of you, a person who's mean to you. Your boss maybe, or the colleague at work, your sister, your auntie, your wife, who knows? a person you're angry with, you're upset about, who's harmful to you. Put them in the enemy category. And the third one is put a stranger there. Have a person whose face you know just enough, but they've done nothing, and they haven't touched your life. So you feel attachment for the friend, aversion for the enemy, and complete indifference for the stranger. So we're trying to change this. This is huge. This is the basis of then developing stable love, compassion, great compassion, and bodhicitta. We're not even going towards them yet. We've got to try and get this view of equanimity clear. So what's some of the logic for it? What's some of the logic to prove that actually they are equal from this point of view? One of the biggest stumbling blocks for us when we hear this, let's say, your ex-husband or your ex-wife or something, person who's really been mean to you, cheated on you, harmed you, and this has happened. The world is full of suffering. And you say to yourself, you're visualizing this person in front of you, visualizing this person at work who's been really unkind, who accused you of doing things wrong, the boss who's fired you. You think of this person and you're feeling the pain this person has caused you, because they have caused you pain. There's no question. Your delusions are the main reason, but they have harmed you, fact. And it's really painful when you think of this. And then you hear Buddha's telling us this person wants to be happy. Just hearing those words, look at our immediate response. We think, what do you mean he wants to be happy? He doesn't deserve it. Check this out. This is huge, because that's part of how anger feels. And that's the way now our relationships are. We will only love those, as far as we're concerned, who deserve it. And what does that mean? They do what I want. I mean, it's so self-centered, we should be embarrassed. That's how we see the universe. We see the entire world of sentient beings through the lenses of our needs. Look at animals. We completely adore our little poodle. We'll give it a psychologist will give it the best lambs, livers, whatever you give. You understand my point? Totally adore our little pussy, our little doggy. And we actually think we're loving it. There is some love there, but I'm sorry, it's completely based on attachment. But look what happens when the rat comes. Look at the feeling when the rat comes. Absolute panic, horror, even the word rat. As soon as we hear it, we want to kill it immediately. Now, this is not the most extreme example of love and attachment and aversion. You adore the poodle. You stroke it, love it, look at it. People even, the seen a show recently on one American on the Netflix. I'm so shocked by it, about animals, People are in love with their animals. They sleep with their animals. This one man, he was kissing his dog on his mouth. She sleeps with me every night. People talk about it as if it is virtue. It is so, I'm just beyond speechless, It's called attachment, people. But when the rat comes, now this is the point, it's sort of evident if you step back and get yourself, this is the point, this is the whole point in equanimity. You've got to get yourself out of the equation. The whole point is to get yourself out of this and see the poodle and the rat separately from you, separately. Let's say you've never heard of poodles and you've never heard of rats, and you just see two creatures. They're kind of one's a bit bigger, one's got more furry hair. They both got eyes, they both got ears, they both got tails, they both got claws, they both got 4 legs. Think about this, think about this. If you've never heard of poodle and never heard of rat, you'd see 2 creatures and you wouldn't know the difference. So what is the difference? The difference is your attachment. You put this fantasy elaboration of their divine qualities onto the poodle, and you put this fantasy of horror and disgust and repulsion onto the rat. That's not from the rat side, and that's not from the poodle side. This is so obvious. It's the same with our people. It's just so clear. When this is one logic. It's always a logical argument to try and break our minds down. This is the whole point. So, if you show me a photo of your present wife, whom you absolutely adore, and who is like an angel, she maybe even is really gorgeous, and you show me a picture of your let's say your former wife, and she's mean and she's cheated on you, They are facts that you know about. But I look at those two photos. I cannot see a difference, can I? I just see two nice people. I see two people. Two people, that's it. This is so starkly obvious. But because we're so consumed by this view of the universe, which is samsaric, which is the view of the three poisons, attachment, aversion, ignorance. It's a totally self-centered view. It's obvious. It's clear that those two people look the same to me. Those two are just two animals, you know. But we see the world only through the lenses of our needs. So if the beings satisfy my needs, that means attachment arises, and then attachment's job is to paint a very delicious picture of them. And if they don't fulfill my needs, if they actually actively harm me, then aversion is in the mind, and that paints a disgusting picture. This is how we live our lives, you know. So it's just not rational. It's arrogant. It's astonishing to think that I only want those who make me happy to be happy and to not suffer. But that's how we are. And of course, it sounds exhausting to think, you mean I've got to love everybody? I mean, even loving one person's hard work. Well, this is where we're heading, isn't it? This is what the point is. So we've got to do this analysis. So what does this mean? This does not mean you chuck out your poodle and bring in the rat. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean you chuck out your beloved wife and you bring in someone else's wife, like a stranger. That would be silly. You've got karma with people. We have a karmic connection with people. That's why people harm us, and that's why people help us, because of our own past history with each other. So when you have that relationship, you've got those children. They're your children. You've got a responsibility, but you've got to change your mind. So how would you practice equanimity? Every day with this view, how would you cultivate this view that the friend, the enemy, and the stranger are equal to each other from one point of view? Well, then, I would use a simple example of your own little grandchild. You adore your grandchild. You absolutely adore your own child, even, whatever. You adore them. They're this little angel for you. You know that because you're seeing through the lenses of attachment. And they're playing with the kid next door, who's a smelly little ugly kid who's mean and rude. That could be a fact. He's mean and rude. Yeah. Saying everyone's equal in terms of wanting happiness and not wanting suffering doesn't mean they're all saints. That's absurd. It's not the point. That's not the issue. That's not the point. So that kid next door might be a little creep. It might be true. So how do you practice equanimity? You just stop and you think. My beloved little angel and that mean kid next door, one is seen through the lenses of my attachment, and I see one through the lens of my aversion. But from their point of view, for each of them, from their point of view, they both want to be happy and don't suffer. It's a very primordial thing we're trying to see. It's a very fundamental point. It's very it's very kind of under everything. Almost you could argue the whole Buddhist path is framed in terms of how to get happy and how not to suffer. First part is for us. Now we're seeing it for others. So this is a huge attitude to get. Don't be vague and, oh, everyone's equal. That's not what's being said. It's much more precise than that. It's trying to get past our own attachment, aversion, and ego grasping. It's clear. Because right now, if you're in love with somebody and you go to a party or you go to a family gathering, there's 47 people there or something, in a millisecond, you check it. In a millisecond, you're checking, where's my beloved? If she's not there, how does everybody else look to you? Like so boring, they could all drop dead. You couldn't care less because all you want to see is your beloved. Or another way to put it, especially if it's a family, with all the dramas and histories of families, within a millisecond, you come into the room and you've already worked out there's the friends, there's the enemies, and there's the strangers. Or you go to a party. Maybe there's two friends there. You make a beeline for your friends. You spend the whole night with your friends. There's the people over there from work who you can't stand. And then the other lot, 99% of them, after 2 days, you don't even remember who was at the party. This is life. This is how we are. Friends, enemies, strangers. We live in this. We just live in that view, never questioning. It's quite profound, really. So it's quite shocking, too, to do this. So you stay living with your wife. You stay having your children. You maybe even avoid the kid next door because he is dangerous. That's reasonable, but you have your mind clear. These beings, because you know karma, due to their past karma, they're suffering this way. You've got the big picture, but you've got this fundamental, you develop this fundamental view that each of them wants to be happy. Each doesn't want to suffer. And then we're moving towards each of the next steps that lead us to love, compassion, great compassion, and finally bodhicitta, you know. It's very intense. So before I go on then, why don't you ask me some questions about just equanimity? I have to whiz through all the rest of the points because there's no time for everything. But equanimity is a powerful one. Once that's clear, it's a stable basis for gradually wanting them all to be happy, wanting them all not to suffer, because we know they want it. That's the basis. So if there are any questions, if not, I'll continue.
You can raise your hand in the participant menu, submenu, if you like.
Okay, I'll keep going because there's no time. I mean, we've got time. Okay, so there's a whole series of points. And I can't go through each one. We'll have no time for that. But the equanimity one's huge to get. Once we've got that clear, then the others make sense, you know. So what we're doing gradually on the basis of this foundation that we've dug, equanimity, we're then moving towards shifting our mind step by step by step to get it to finally want all beings to be happy and to want all beings not to suffer. So the very next point in this series of 11, you know, it sounds a peculiar one, this next one. It sounds very odd, especially if you have never thought of reincarnation. It's simply, you need your calculator for this one. It's really all beings have been your mum. Especially if you're in a culture, you know, where you think your mother's the worst person on the planet and she's the cause of all your suffering. You think, you know, what's Buddha trying to prove here? My God, you know. But it's just taking this view because, you know, the traditional Asian view, as we know, I mean, it's everywhere, it used to be, but we're so cynical in the West and everyone hates their mums and blames them, whatever. That the mother's an example of a kind person. Sometimes when people ask His Holiness about this, he says, well, don't worry about it. Don't use your mother. Use anybody who's nurtured you. The whole idea of a mother is a person who's loved and nurtured you, you know. But all beings have been our mother. So the reason for the mother is that we want to try and see that we want to have, they all nurtured me. They all love me, you know. So the next point from there is then the mother's kind. And there's two things here. It's really important. There's 2 points here, 3A and 3B, to contemplate. The first is the mother is kind. And then the second one is, I'll talk about this one instead. That all beings are kind to me. Well, on the face of it, this doesn't make any sense, but let's analyze it. But I think we should be clear about the word kind here. When we say kind, usually, I'm sorry, again, it's based on attachment. When I say, oh, she's so kind, we usually mean she was kind to me, which means she did what I wanted. So, you know, you go to the cafe, I always use that example, and the waitress is smiling at you and she serves you some chocolate cake and gives you extra cream and a discount, you'll say she's kind. I mean, she maybe doesn't think, maybe she thinks you're some horrible old person and cracks a joke to the cook about you. But you don't care because you got what you wanted. Your attachment got something. That's how we are. If a person is kind to us, I mean, it's not trying to be cynical, but, you know, what we mean by kind is a person does what I want. A person can be really kind in themselves even, but because they didn't do what you wanted, you don't think they're kind. So we're very narrow even in our view of what kind means. So here what we're trying to see is not therefore, when we're saying that all people are being kind, are kind to me, it's not that they're all doing what I want. No, sorry, forgive me, wait a minute. It is that, but it's difference. The point here is this, that, okay, I'm saying too many words. I'll start again. The contemplation of this point, 3B, in this series of techniques, 4B, 4, is that to contemplate how, this is my way of putting it, since we were conceived, if you think about it, up until now, every single thing that has ever facilitated our life, everything we have ever got, the food, the clothes, even the body itself, things, money in the bank, heating in our house, everything that's facilitated our life and our happiness is the handiwork of sentient beings. This is scientific truth. We never think about it. So you point to anything that you've got, even I just think of my woolen zen, you know, made in India or somewhere. You start to analyze and think about how many people have been involved in the production of this woolen zen, this woolen shawl. All the sheep, All the creatures who died when they, the little tiny baby creatures who got stood on when they got the sheep to get the sheep's wool off. The little sheep being all cold and shivering because their wool was taken off their back. Then the people who got the wool and fixed it and did it and turned it into the things. The people who dyed the wool. The people who made the shawl. The people who made the machine that made the shawl. This is fact. This is actually based on dependent arising. There's hundreds, if not thousands of people, sentient beings who've died and lived and worked just so I can keep warm on a cool day. Now that's fact, but we never think about it. Why? Because I'm getting what I want. I'm satisfied. Thank you very much. If I think about the people who did, I think I'm fair enough. But we would never think about that. This is really a powerful one. All the food. Think of all the food we eat. If we eat meat, think of all the creatures who died. If we're vegetarian, think of all the creatures who died. We never like to because we're just so fanatic about food and eating. We think we're holy saints if we eat vegetarian, but we don't think of all the creatures who die in the ground, the billions of creatures and bugs who die for the vegetables. This is fact, but we never think about it. Because why? Because we're driven by getting what I need. I mean, it makes us sound like we're all monsters. But because this is normal world, this is samsara, Buddha's view is more refined. He's showing how we are all in normal, even ordinary people. We're driven by attachment, driven by delusions, driven by suffering, So this is a profound point. So this again has got nothing to do with people being kind in their nature. The person, the person who made my woolen shawl, the one who dyed it, who's the best person, who got the best color dye, maybe he's a pedophile. I don't know. See, it's not the point. If we discover he's a pedophile, we'll never wear his shawl. Beings are who they are, So what we're trying to see is whether they're saints or sinners isn't the issue here. It's the fact that all these different beings worked in their own jobs and ends up as me getting my nice maroon shawl, the right color, the right wool. This is fact. So this is huge if we start to think about it. When you eat the cake in the cafe, we only say thank you if it's the cake we like. We only say it's nice. But if it's not nice, we don't care. So when you realize is people made it. Human beings made that cake. People made that cake. Creatures died for my shawl. People died for those vegetables. This is a huge point, actually. It's quite profound. It's not sentimental. It's fact. But it just shows the intensity of our self-centeredness, of how we don't think about this. The only time we're grateful for the beautiful shawl or the nice cake is if people, when they serve us or they give us a discount or it's extra good or something, So we're trying to smash the delusions here. We're trying to get past our usual view, the usual lenses we use to see the world, which is through whether I get my needs satisfied or not. Of course, it sounds awful, but if we analyze it, it's true. So this is a huge one. Millions of beings have been involved since they're born. Even your body. Think of your body even. What is your body, We think it's this, my body. Excuse me, your mother and father worked hard. The egg and sperm came together. And then how come your body grew in your mother's womb? Is because she kindly ate food every day. So what's the food? She probably ate chickens and fishes and all those fishes and chickens going into her body and turning into your body. What a miracle. What is your body by the time this little squealing little thing comes out after 9 months? What is it? It's a little mountain of peas and potatoes and cows and chickens and fish and also the creatures who all died, just so you can have a little body. Even the body, is the fruit of hard work of sentient beings. Kirti Sencham Rinpoche, I'll never forget one time, he talked about certain level bodhisattva, meaning they've realized emptiness. So actually, an Arya bodhisattva, they've realized emptiness, some level of bodhisattva. For that bodhisattva, he said, the action of cutting off his hand and feeding it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. I mean, that sounds intense, I mean, this bodhisattva teachings are unbelievably advanced. We can't even pretend, but we can think about it and analyze it and think about it and study it and meditate on it and aspire to become like that. When we look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we look at Lama Zopa Rinpoche or anybody this is where it's so powerful to have examples in front of us. Because if you just read these words in a book, it seems impossible. But you see living examples of them, then you think, wow, if they can do it, so can I, you know. So these are the little points. This is step by step. So the third one, so that was 3B. And then 4 is like a conclusion. I must repay their kindness. I must repay their kindness. This sense of incredible wish upon appreciating the kindness of all beings. How just your life itself exists in dependence upon the life and death of sentient beings. This is a scientific fact. When you start to see it, you're so moved by it. Then all these suffering sentient beings, what can I do? They all want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. Then it's my job. We're moving towards. We've not even got to love and compassion yet. We're moving there. And then you're taking from this other, these are from the 6, 7 points. 1. Then you got from the low drop. You got now this attitude of the one of exchanging self for others. So the next point, I think one of the points here, these points, the next few points are to do with first thinking about now we think about how all other beings are equal to me. It's the same as equanimity, except that the groups you're comparing are all others and then you. All others and then you. How all others are exactly the same as me. In how they wanted to be happy and don't want to suffer. This one's like equanimity, but it's much more intense. Everybody is like me. You know how you feel every second. You're yearning for comfort. You're yearning for happiness. You're yearning not to be harmed. You only want things to be nice. You only want the tie to be the right way. You only want the boss to like you. You only want your wife to be kind. Every second we're driven by this feeling, this need, this yearning to be happy. Wanting to be happy, can't bear the pain, can't bear the headache, can't bear the difficulties. We know this. We're so intimate with this already. And the contemplation here is, guess what, Robina? Everybody else is exactly the same. How you feel as they feel. Sure, we're all different. Got different levels of attachment, different levels of anger, different levels of love and compassion. But we're all kind of variations of the same recipe, you know, because we've all got the same mind. We can see this. This is when we really can see this is driving towards empathy, isn't it? When you have empathy and compassion, we know that. You know how they feel. That's what compassion is. So these are the very precise analytical points to dig really deep into the delusions in the mind. These very precise individual little points, digging very deep in order to get these realizations very strong and stable, not just fleeting moments of them, you know. Everybody is the same. Yeah, there are pedophiles and maniacs and terrorists and warmongers and insane people. Absolutely true. But we're getting past all that here to see how everybody's driven by the same wish to be happy and not suffer. So then now moving towards exchanging ourselves for others. As next steps, gradually they talk about how we need to contemplate the disadvantages to oneself of being selfish. See, the one thing I didn't mention, the whole emphasis in the first stages of practice, the main enemy is called attachment. Here it's framed differently. The enemy is called selfishness. The enemy is called self-cherishing. The enemy is called putting self first. That's what we're trying to shift. It's a different approach. We're trying to exchange self for others. So eventually we think of the disadvantages to oneself of being self-centered. Then we think of the advantages to oneself of cherishing others. This sounds initially to us as like a bit weird, a bit selfish, but it's really helpful to see this. We've got to really see this first. I remember when I first heard about bodhicitta, I heard His Holiness. It was too much for me. It was too much. It was too high. I couldn't get it, you know. How can you get to that point? Then I heard His Holiness say, if you want to benefit others, practice compassion. If you want to benefit yourself, practice compassion. So it's this stepping stone, you know. You've got to realize that. Then eventually it can be genuine compassion. You've got to start slowly. So the next one is, and then we get to the point now where we do Tonglen. Now this is like the practice that actually comes from the 8 verses of mind training, I think. This practice of giving and taking. This is like the essence. It's like this practice is, as a result of this, we then actually develop love and compassion. And it's not the only approach, but it's one that's very popular, you know. So what is Tonglen? Excuse me. Tonglen, giving, taking. It's this, you know, kind of outrageous meditation. You do it in a meditation. It's an attitude that you have every second, but you can formalize it in meditation, where you visualize, let's say, a person. You start with a person who's sick, like your friend. Start with your own beloved with a headache. So the whole thing you're trying to do when you do Tonglen, when you breathe, you use your breath. When you breathe in first, you imagine wanting to take the headache from them, and you breathe it into yourself. And it's just a visualization. It's a way of thinking. You're not trying to get a headache. That's ridiculous. But the attitude is, this is what compassion is. But it's even as added on top. Compassion. Okay, what is love? It's summarized by the definition, the thought, may you be happy. Compassion is, may you not suffer. Then there's another level that's a unique level of compassion to the Bodhisattva path. And that's called Mahakaruna, great compassion. And this is the extra special level. This is a powerful one. His Holiness sometimes would call it universal responsibility. And it's the one, not only do you go, oh my God, look at that person with a headache. That's terrible. You have empathy. But the next one is you go, this is great compassion. What can I do to help? It's this sense of responsibility that a bodhisattva has. That's the unique one of the bodhisattva that makes all the difference. That is what leads to bodhicitta. You could argue Tonglen is another one on top. Not only, oh my God, look at that suffering. Not only what can I do to take it away, but also, you know what? Give it to me. I'd rather have it than you. I can handle it. I'd rather you be free of suffering. This is insane, you know. This is completely outrageous. This is completely outrageous. It's shocking. It's opposite to normal. So yet we do have it for our children. The number of parents you hear, and it's marvelous, who's, I wish I would have the sickness instead, they say. That's Tonglen. But of course, we're doing it for everybody here. This is extraordinary view, you know. So you practice in this technique, you're not trying to get a headache, number one. And number two, it is not a healing technique. We often think of it like that. That's not. There's lots of healing techniques. This is not a healing technique. What this is you're merely using that person in front of you, visualizing your beloved with a headache, as a reference point for you to develop the courage that if you could, you would take the headache instead of them. That's what you're trying to accomplish in Tonglen. So you breathe in, and you imagine you've got a little rock at your heart, let's say, it's your self-cherishing. And you imagine when you're breathing this yucky smoke, you know, you're hitting, you know, you're smashing your self-cherishing. And then when you breathe out, like this blissful light, you imagine giving them your happiness, your well-being, everything, your merits, everything. It's a very powerful technique. But you got to be knowing why you're doing it. It's not to get a headache. It's not to actually heal this person. It's got nothing to do with that. It's about you developing the courage that if you could, you would take that headache. You would give them your happiness. It's huge. It's amazing. And the culmination of this is love, compassion, and then great compassion. And then that kicks into bodhicitta, finally. People spend years in these meditations, each one quite precise. You dig deep at each level, you know, not just a generalized, oh, yes, may everybody be happy. It's too vague, you know. It's got to go deep into your bones where it actually shifts your mind primordially and the realization becomes stable. We can see now we have love and compassion. There's no doubt. But it's not stable. When really bad things happen, I mean, we can have real compassion for one moth. You catch it, blow mantra, put it outside. But what if you have run over by 1,000 moths or 1,000 ants or 1,000 rats? Our compassion goes out the window. Convenience takes over. So we can see our compassion is very limited, you know. This is natural. Don't be guilty about it. This is how we are because delusions are so rampant. So we've got to take this slowly to fundamentally change the mind, you know. Are there any questions about all that before we do the 6 perfections and discuss emptiness?
You may raise your hand or unmute.
Okay, if it's not. Okay, so now we're speeding along here. So bodhicitta, like I said, is the culmination of love and compassion and great compassion. It's not the same as compassion. It's a result of compassion. It's an attitude of never giving up benefiting others. That's it. Knowing it's your job. That's your job description. So having now accomplished bodhicitta, your next phase of practice, as I said, is the 6 perfections. And now we're practicing the morality of benefiting others. This comes here. The assumption being that we're so trained and subdued, we've stopped harming, subdued our body, subdued our speech, subdued our delusions, smashed self-cherishing, got bodhicitta. Now the final stages of our path. So the first 4, the bodhisattva bops along from life to life to life, practicing these in relation to sentient beings: generosity, morality in general. The whole path is morality or ethics, but we're including here not just the ethics of refraining from harming, but we're adding also the ethics of benefiting others, because now the assumption is we've got more wisdom, you know, we know how to benefit others. Then patience, and then joyful effort. And then the last 2 you perfect in your meditation. Single point of concentration used in the 6th one to realize emptiness. So the fact is, concentration is not even a Buddhist technique. It came from these genius yogis before the Buddha. Buddha happily took it with him, you know, no problem. And emptiness is not a Mahayana teaching in its nature. It's a Theravadan teaching. It's a Hinayana teaching. It's, you know, because that's how you become a Hinayana Arhat. You've got to realize emptiness. So clearly it belongs there, but in high school, in the middle scope, but it's here taught in the framework of the perfections of the Bodhisattva, combined with the work, combined with bodhicitta. That's what they both become. They both help each other. So, okay. Generosity is, you know, a very interesting one. There are 3 levels of it they teach in the lamrim. The first one is the generosity of giving things, material things. Then the second is giving advice. And the third, they call it giving protection. Well, giving advice is meant to be more difficult. It means giving spiritual advice. That's an action of generosity. But actually, I think we find that easier. We love giving advice. It's very simple. We love telling people what to do. We love giving advice. We love it. But we don't maybe like giving rupees. We don't like giving our euros or our dollars. We're a bit nervous about that. So it's something we have to cultivate, you know. And giving is the first level. All these perfections are taught in order of difficulty. So the first one, as Tzong Khapa says in one of his hymns of experience, I always quote this: the generosity is the wish-fulfilling jewel with which you can fulfill the hopes of all sentient beings. It's the basis of the activity of the bodhisattva. It's the basis of the activity of the bodhisattva, in that it develops the selflessness and undaunted courage to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment. So basically, now you've got bodhicitta. Every sentient being you meet, they're your responsibility. So this first one, the one of giving, it sounds very simple, being generous. Oh yeah, sounds nice. But it's kind of very profound in its meaning. Because, you know, if we've got self-centered, and we're self-centered and think about me and only give to people I like and not to give to, we don't like giving, because it's like it's giving part of yourself. And when we've got lots of self-centeredness and lots of attachment and lots of fears, giving is not comfortable. But so it's a very profound practice. As Rinpoche said, you know, don't think of receiving, think of giving. Because if we're a normal person with attachment, we're always liking to get something. It's one of the most profound of the 8 worldly dharmas, wanting to receive things. So this is, we're trying to shift the attitude. When you see a sentient being, what do they need? Like a mother for her child. It's such a good analogy. A mother never has to ask the baby, what would you like? The mother doesn't wait for the 6-month-old baby to say, I want dinner. Well, some mothers do because they're so unhappy and the baby dies. That's what happens. You've got to anticipate. That's what we're trying to do here, like a bodhisattva, and every person we meet is like a child, our child, and our job is to give them what they need. So you don't walk around looking like a holy saint, shoving things into people's hands. It's more, it's not like that. But your attitude is to think, what can I give? That's the attitude to have in the mind every day, to cultivate the attitude. What can I give? What do people need? That's a profound one. Some people, you read about in the news, with COVID-19, you read all the different types of experiences of ordinary human beings. Some are completely miserable, totally depressed, unhappy, don't know what to do, wonder what, no one loves me, I've got nothing. Other people are out there, little children even. I remember one little kid in Washington, I read in the Washington Post, one 7-year-old kid who was bullied at school. He started deciding, what can I do for all the old people? So he sort of, with the help of his mother, they ended up getting like big truckloads of food. I mean, this little boy decided, what can I give? If you don't think it, you won't do it. If you're just thinking, who's going to give to me? You're sitting there miserable. If you're thinking, what can I give? It's profound, the difference. So don't just think, oh yeah, being generous. We're generous to our beloveds, yeah. It's a profound attitude to grow in the mind, to have this view of what can I give. It's huge. It's the first level of this very brave attitude of the bodhisattva. The next one is to benefit us, to help others. It's the same thing as in generosity in a way, but it's a more expansive. It's not just giving things, but helping. What can I do, Knowing what can I do? You see sentient beings, what can I do? You see that homeless person for the generosity or the morality. You don't think, well, who else will help them? It's my job. They're in front of me. What can I do? So, of course, we are like this now, many people, but we're overwhelmed and we don't have any wisdom. We don't know how to do it properly, so we get exhausted because we've still got self-cherishing and attachment. But here, you've got much more wisdom, and you're growing this hugely, helping others, helping people. Helping who? Helping whoever needs help. Rich people, poor people, happy people, sad people, sick people, people in prison, helping people who need help. The next two are patience and perseverance. And these are pretty intense, Patience is something very strange for us. There's great amount of talk on the earlier stages of the Bodhisattva pathway. I didn't go to any of it, there's just no time. That's about, practicing greeting problems. As Lama Zopa says, we need to learn to like problems like we like ice cream. And this is really just another way of saying patience, So what is patience? We have a really wrong understanding of patience, I think. We think of patience as like passive aggression, basically. Because patience is the exact opposite of aversion, anger. And anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So when we understand these back in middle scope, we'll deeply understand what patience is. So patience isn't passive. It's not right now. When we meet the thing that attachment doesn't want, we have this panic attack. We can't stand it. That noise, the horrible thing happening, the wife leaving us, little money going, being fired, terrible things happen to us. It's true. So attachment has a complete panic attack. Aversion arises, and then we completely freak out. Because we can't stand problems. Aversion is like a panic attack in the face of a problem. So patience is this courageous attitude of greeting the problem. This is huge. This is a huge practice. It's a brave, brave attitude, patience. So they talk about patience in the face of abuse, which sounds so heavy. When people are mean to you. Then the patience in the face of the difficulties happening, like sickness and difficulties. And the third one's patience in relation to the obstacles in your practice. So it makes a person incredibly powerful, very strong, very deep, very capable. And this leads us to the next one, which sounds weird in the beginning, enthusiasm. God, you sort of imagine a person all excited, all enthusiastic, or they call it joyful effort, or they call it perseverance. And the Lamas would say, this is the most important. If you don't have this, you can have patience, you can have wisdom, but if you don't have this, you will not succeed. This is the never giving up, never giving up, never giving up. So the way to really understand what enthusiasm is to see the opposite. It's quite surprising. The opposite is called laziness. This sounds hilarious. Let's analyze that, the 3 levels. The first one, and it's so clear when we analyze it, as soon as you get a job, there's a job to be done, you know. Whatever it is, just get out of bed and go to work. What's the first one? You wake up and you're tired. And the first thing is you're thinking, oh, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. Too much effort, isn't it? All you want to do is sink back into sleep. Or you see the dishes. I mean, I'm talking samsara here. I'm not talking the Dharma practice. We're talking here about Dharma practice. Even laziness here is considered enthusiasm for samsara is a type of laziness. But I'm just using it as an analogy. We know this. We've got this inertia, you know. We just to have to get up and do the dishes, get up and go to work. I can't be bothered. Too much effort. This is the most obvious level of it. And of course, it's not being critical. It's just observing the human mind. And we've got to analyze why. What is it that takes too much effort? It's to do what attachment doesn't want. Attachment is the cause. Attachment is this deepest junkie in us that just wants its comfort zone. We need to be comfortable. We've got this craving beyond sex and drugs and all the other stuff. You know, we have enormous enthusiasm for samsaric things. The effort we'll make to go get the chocolate cake. But I'm talking here, this kind of inertia we have. Can't be bothered. Too much effort. And what's too much effort is what attachment doesn't want. Because the most kind of the deepest, the most primordial or the most kind of gross level of attachment is this, to be in our comfort zone, to be comfortable. Mentally and physically, emotionally, to be comfortable. That's laziness. We're going to see. Most people live their lives like that. So all the lamas say, and it's logical in the ordinary life, if you think of samsaric effort, the only time you're going to make effort to do something, to go beyond your comfort zone, is when you know the benefits. This is really clear. So this is why it's so hard in Dharma practice to see the benefits of giving up delusions, to see the benefits of practicing every day, to see the benefits of getting bodhicitta, of realizing emptiness, getting single point of concentration. They all seem so far away from us. So if you don't know the benefits, of course you won't make effort. I mean, it's obvious if you don't know the benefits. If there's no benefit, nothing will drive you to do it. We can see in samsaric effort. We know the benefits. So we will make effort. It's not effort really, it's just samsara. But we use it as an analogy, it's a good analogy. So the second kind of laziness is linked to the first, really. The second one is what they call actually laziness, making effort in samsaric things, following attachment to get what attachment wants. But the one I'm saying here, another one is more linked to the first one, but it's like, I put it as the second one. I'm making it confusing here now. This next level of this one, you see the job to be done. First level is I can't be bothered, too much effort. But the next one, which is really tricky, which is almost sounds like a virtue, and and this is the one we do most often. The next millisecond, you say to yourself, "Oh, I'm too busy. I'll do it later." Procrastination. This is the worst crime against ourselves. We put off. That's our worst pain, and we carry this burden throughout our lives. I should do this, and I should do this, and I should do this. I should do my practice. I should do a retreat. I should go to that thing. I should study that book. We're talking about Dharma practice now. And it's exhausting for us. And again, in ordinary life, we know this one. We put off so many things. The Lamas say that when you die, one of the worst pains, suffering for the person, is all the things you put off doing. We're talking Dharma now. You have this sadness and regret for the wasted life. So again, what is the thing you say you're too busy to do? It's the thing that takes effort. And what's the thing that takes effort? What attachment doesn't want. This is the analysis we have to do to see it. And we're all like this. Attachment is so pervasive, so overwhelming, so completely covers everything about us, our body, our speech, and our mind. And it's hard to go past that, isn't it? So that's why we have to do it incrementally, one step at a time. And you kind of, and this leads us to the third one, which sounds a bit odd again, but it's really logical. It's this third laziness, the most pervasive, the biggest stumbling block, is it says when you see the job to be done, you see the thing to do, and you go, oh, I can't do that. It's impossible. It's too much for me. I can't do that. I can't accomplish that. I can't do that. And we believe it's true. So look at our spiritual practice. If we have a teacher, if we have a Lama, spiritual teacher, a mentor, there they are, this perfect example for us of how to be. So, but someone like Lama Zopa, who shows the aspect of being, Lama, His Holiness is already incredible. If you think of, okay, I'll use His Holiness, so we all know him. His Holiness, he's very careful. He shows the aspect of being a very ordinary person. He goes to bed early. He gets up early. He eats 2 meals a day. He acts like a perfect monk. He looks very casual, easygoing. Lama Zopa is more unusual in the way he shows. Lama Zopa shows the aspect of not sleeping, for example. That's kind of completely, you go, that's not possible. I could never do that. But if you think of His Holiness, if you think about it, since he's 15, he was given the job of running Tibet at the age of 15, 70 years ago, and he hasn't stopped. He hasn't given up for 70 years. So it looks effort, and this is where it's effortless. It's effortless for him. He looks so funny and casual and friendly, doesn't he? He's never moaning, he never drama, he never struggles. He doesn't have to talk about all his problems. He doesn't have a counselor to work out all the horrors and the depressions and the anxieties. He's just this happy fellow. We can easily misunderstand that. He is the proof of the pudding. He is the proof of all the work we've done so far. We're talking up to now. But look at the effortlessness one. He never stopped. He works diplomatically, socially, politically, scientifically, religiously. He works in every field on the planet, never giving up for a start, just for Tibet, just that alone. Never gives up, but never moaning, because he's you can see he's a perfected effort. It's now joyful effort for him. So it looks, and when it's like that, of course, it's obvious, it's effortless, because he's done it, he's accomplished it. So we can go, oh, that's just His Holiness. Oh, that's just the Dalai Lama. I can't do that. No, not now, but we can aim towards it. Lama Zopa was the one of no sleeping. I remember Venerable Roger said, I remember somebody quoted me this years ago, something like this, that for Rinpoche, sleep is a disgusting waste of time. This is too insane for normal world. He'd be considered mentally ill, wouldn't he, in normal world? So I think of that, and then when I'm doing my practice at night, and all I can think of is going to bed. Bed is so delicious. And especially when you get older, isn't it? Bed is just the most delicious thing. You can't wait to sink into that bed. And so I'm sitting there, and then I think of Rinpoche, imagining he's all perky, and after he's done all his work with other people, he goes to his bed and he sits up and he starts to meditate. I can't even think of it. It makes me just tired thinking about it. So I can't pretend to do that. I can't be guilty and anguished and, oh my God, try and sit up all night. I won't even bother. So what'll I do? It's true, I can't do that, but that's not the right attitude. I can do that, but not yet, but I can aim for it. Like you're in first grade tennis and you watch Federer. If you go, oh, I can't do that, then that's the end of you. You won't practice. But if you know, I can do that and I want to be like that, then you will do it one step at a time. That's the enthusiasm. So I will say to myself, this sounds so silly, but what else can I do? When I lie down and I sink into my bed and sink into sleep, I try to remember to think, may I find sleep disgusting. So I'm hopefully training my mind, programming my mind, so by the time I get to the next life, I won't want much sleep because I've been training my mind in it. That's the best I can do. But to say, oh, I can't be like that, that's laziness, because you can, but you go towards it. It's dependent arising. This is a really important point about this one. You can't do it now. We all know Rome wasn't built in a day. We're told all these lovely sayings our mothers tell us. Well, obviously don't say that in Hindi, where maybe Mumbai wasn't built in a day, or Bangalore wasn't built. No, not Bangalore. What's that old city? Varanasi wasn't built in a day. So anyway, this is the three kinds of laziness. And we can hear it. We can hear it psychologically. We're all the same. And it's because of attachment, inertia, wanting comfort. It's so hard. And we have to do it every single day. You've been practicing for years. Every day I've got to do my practice properly. Every day I've got to make effort to do my practice. It's not effortless. It's only when you've got single point of concentration and you get bliss, then it's effortless, okay? So meanwhile, we just do it every day. And then we all know when you do make the effort, you're so happy with yourself. That's the bonus. If we want to remember the benefits, remember how happy you'll be with yourself. That's a really good point. You know, in your own daily life, just in the samsaric things, all the jobs you put off in the house, and you finally decide after 6 years you're going to clean out that cupboard. And when you do it, it took so little time and you feel so happy that you did it. We've got to remember that. And that gives us courage to make effort, you know, because you'll feel good about yourself. You'll feel good about yourself. So the last two perfections are concentration and emptiness. Okay, any questions, you people? No questions?
I think Amit had a question about Tonglen practice.
Talk to me, Amit.
No, so Venerable, my question was about how to learn Tonglen meditation.
How to learn it.
Yeah. Do I need to do a program for that, or can I do it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you just, if you understand clearly what it is, if you look in you can read in the lamrim commentaries, especially if you read Lama Zopa Rinpoche. If you look online at lamayeshi.com and you read Lama Zopa, there are hundreds of versions of Rinpoche saying the words of Tonglen. So you get the idea and you simply take it and you do it yourself. It's not intellectually complicated. It's very clear, but get it clear the meaning of it, Amit, that you're trying to, you know, you're not trying to take a headache. You're not trying to take on their suffering. You're not trying to take away their suffering. You're trying to develop the attitude that if you could, you would do those things. So I think Lama Zopa is a really good example. Do you know his teaching? I don't know, Amit, but do you know his teachings or not? I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, not yet, but I will do some search and
yeah, I think so. I also certainly, I've got your email address, certainly. So why don't I find you some and I'll send you some. Shall I do that?
Thank you. Yeah, that'll be very helpful. Thank you.
Do that. Thank you. What else, people? Okay, why don't we continue? We've got 45 minutes. How long have we got? Shanti?
Yeah, 45 minutes.
Okay, so the last two we perfect in our meditation. So concentration, or it's shamatha. The name of the end result of this technique is the state of the label of this meditation is the goal. It's called calm abiding, or shamatha, however you say it properly in Sanskrit. It's a state of samadhi, concentration. So this, of course, has come from ingenious Indians before the Buddha, you know, this technique, this brilliant technique that enables you to completely subdue the grosser level of our mind, which means the conceptual and the sensory. So in ordinary psychology, in neuroscience, there is no such state of mind posited. Because when you've fully accomplished this state, your brain's not functioning. You look like you were dead, which is why we think it's mystical. But it's not, it's the mind. And because Buddhas are searching these subtler levels of mind. So why do we need this? This is vital to understand. In order to cut all the delusions from the mind, the mind that's been samsaric for eons, Buddha says, the delusions that are deeply ingrained, so primordially deep that we consider them normal. This is why Buddha's view is so radical. The things that Buddha says we can accomplish just seem like weird in the West, you know, weird in neuroscience and modern psychology. So in order to unpack and unravel these layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of ancient misconceptions, because all these emotional afflictions, all these delusions, all these neuroses are rooted in being conceptual stories. They're packed solid, so solid we can't even get into them. So the only way we can really unpack them, radically unpack them, we must start today with our mind wherever we're at. That's the job of being a Buddhist, unpacking and unraveling these misconceptions, thinking about them. But when we get to when we access this subtle level of mind, and we accomplish this concentration, the level of capacity, the capability of that level of laser-like focus is beyond our imagination. In Lama Yeshe's book, Mahamudra, which came out, I think, last year, Lama would always tell us, he doesn't just give the technical explanation of this technique, Because Mahamudra is a meditation on emptiness using this single point of concentration. But he tells us some of the advantages, the amazing qualities you would accomplish. You'd be an astonishing person if you had samadhi, you know. But the Buddha says, this is where the Buddha diverged from the previous views. He said, you haven't gone far enough. Your mind is astonishing. You've given up all the grosser levels of suffering. Your mind is super subtle, super spacious, sees the universe, clairvoyant, so many qualities. But you still haven't done enough, he says. You've still got the root delusion to uproot. We still see things as intrinsic. We still have a grasping at everything as inherent. So in order to cut that root, you can't do it at the grosser level. You have to get this more refined, subtle, focused level of mind. It's like the microscope of the mind. It's only with, as Lama says in Mahamudra, it is impossible to unpack it, to uproot the root delusion, to realize emptiness without concentration. It's impossible. So concentration is taught, very simply, is taught in the text. It's described in terms of 9 stages of cultivation. And the 2 main obstacles from the very beginning, and those obstacles get ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. And when you completely conquered these obstacles is when you have concentration. The 2 main obstacles are the tendency of the mind to either be overexcited, never stopping, chat, 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 we all know that one, or the other tendency of the mind to become thick and dull. So we know if you sit down to meditate, you either go completely berserk and completely forget what you're doing and just chat away, or the extreme example, you go to sleep. That's the extreme state of dullness. So the concentration technique is an ever more subtle working with counteracting these 2 extremes to the point where the mind is now effortlessly focused, completely excitement completely gone, the dullness completely gone. The mind is just super clear, super subtle. And as I said in Mahamudra, Lama describes some of the qualities you'd have, and it sounds almost impossible, you know. But what are you doing with this concentration? This is the point. You can be forgiven for thinking you've achieved liberation. The qualities are so astonishing. But they're merely the bonus. They're merely the bonus. The purpose of getting single point of concentration is only so that you can use it in the 6th one, the perfection, the final stages of your spiritual practice, where you now unpack and unravel and see crystal clear and realize how there never has been, isn't, and never could be this intrinsic self that we cling to. That's the deepest mistake our mind makes. So let's talk about that, the 6th one, the realization of emptiness. So one way that is taught, that's coming from the Buddha, of course coming from the Buddha, that Tzong Khapa, our lineage Lama in the 14th century, describes. And as Lama Yeshe says, you know, all the Lamas say that this is the best method for realizing emptiness is to think about dependent arising. So dependent arising, this term, or dependence or interdependence, or, you know, is a term that's used, is like the shorthand for how things exist conventionally. And then you have how things exist ultimately. These are called the 2 truths. And these 2, it's a powerful way to this is the best method. As Lama Yeshe says, dependent arising is the king of logics to realize emptiness. So then emptiness is the shorthand for how things exist ultimately, and then the word dependent arising is like shorthand for how things exist conventionally. And the fact is, these 2 truths, things exist dependent arisings, and things have no inherent nature. Things have no inherent nature, things lack inherent existence. There's many synonyms. The way Buddha says, okay, just remember again, go back to the high school, middle scope, we talked about the mind. So when we learn the Buddhist model of the mind, we learn that the mind has lots of delusions, neurotic, deluded misconceptions in it. The mind has valid, virtuous, appropriate states of mind. And then we have the mechanics of the mind, like concentration, good memory, lots of those. So the first two, the negative, neurotic, deluded ones, they're all liars. They're misconceptions. And some of them have an emotional component, like attachment and anger. But the root delusion, known as ignorance, ma-ripa in Tibetan, ignorance. I don't know what the Sanskrit is. This is the deepest mistake, but it's so subtle, so primordial, we can't see it. So we do all this other work earlier to get us ready, and now we're ready to see it because we've trained our minds. So the root delusion is called ignorance. It gives rise to attachment to get with that. So ignorance is this primordial mistake that causes me to believe totally in a separate, solid, concrete, inherent, intrinsic, real, findable me. It's a deep, subtle point. The amazing Indians before, I don't know all the names of all the different Indian philosophies, but this is what they were going. This is all the work they did. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And they were just, but the Buddha said there's still more to go. That's why he diverged in his own direction. They still assert, even at the highest level, there's still some intrinsic self there. And then the Buddhist view says, no, there isn't. And that's one of the main separations between the earlier views and the Buddha's view. His views about the nature of self. So he's saying that this ignorance grasps, believes in an intrinsic self. And the subtler and grosser levels of this, obviously. That's the main mistake. On the basis of this, we get attachment to get what that me wants. On the basis of attachment, we get angry when the me doesn't get what it wants. And then all the other delusions as a result, pride and arrogance and all the rest, They're all built upon the foundation of the root delusion. So the uprooting of that root delusion, that's liberation. That's when you get liberation. And then combined with bodhicitta, you become a Buddha. So we need this concentration at a subtle level. We need to access the microscope of our mind because our mind at a gross level is not capable of getting it. But we have to start somewhere. So, okay. So what we're trying to do, so the best way to realize this emptiness of intrinsic existence of one's own self is to see it in the relation to what the self is conventionally. So the universe consists of millions of different phenomena, aren't there? We know that. The computers and mugs and lamps and iPads and flowers and people. So a person is an example of a phenomenon. When you first study Buddhist philosophy, you learn all the different terms for that which exists. Phenomenon, object of knowledge, existent, established base. There are several synonyms. So we first, in order to discover, Buddha's saying this mistake of ignorance relates to everything. We think there's an intrinsic mug, an intrinsic lamp, an intrinsic computer, an intrinsic me. So what we have to first do before we investigate, is there an intrinsic thermos? We have to establish first conventionally what's a thermos. If we have to try and investigate, is there an intrinsic me? I have to establish what is a conventional person. So the word person, the word me, I, they're all synonymous. A dog is a person, an I, a me. Each has a sense of this intrinsic me. A Buddha is a me. But they realize the emptiness of the me. So there's me, I, person, all the same. Okay, so let's use the example of this phenomenon, me. And we have to first establish that there is a me existing. There's a person called Robina. There's a person called Amit. There's a person called Shanti, But what Buddha's saying is, all these delusions in our mind, what we do, as Lama Tzong Khapa puts it, these delusions, the root delusion and then the attachment and the anger and all the others, are all variations of the same thing. They're all liars. They're all misconceptions. This delusion called ignorance and all the other delusions as well, what they do is they decorate on top of what is there, the conventional thermos, the conventional lamp, the conventional person. What these delusions do is decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that just don't exist there. So it's easy when in the middle scope we looked at attachment. Attachment is a delusion that is the main voice of this I that is always hungry, always wanting something more, never feels satisfied. That's the irony of ego in Buddhism, that we believe in this intrinsic me, but it's an unhappy feeling. It's like an unhappy me, a miserable me, a bereft me, a never have enough me. So attachment is main voice. So we're always looking for something out there, such that when I make contact with it, it'll fill me up and I'll get satisfaction. So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake, the girlfriend, the job, everything. It exaggerates the deliciousness of everything. So we get all excited. And then aversion exaggerates the ugliness of everything. Then we all get depressed. Ego grasping, this is a colloquial term for this ignorance, deep in our bones, the root delusion. We can call it, when it's referring to the me, we can call it ego grasping. It's got this instinct to grasp. It's utterly not happy. So this ego grasping exaggerates. So, ego grasping exaggerates the very ontological status itself of me. It over exaggerates the me. We all know the word I looms large in our minds. We know that. And when there's the view of I, there's the view of other, isn't there? So one whole approach of breaking down this is the compassion approach. This approach is more the wisdom approach, and they both help each other, the two wings of the bird. So you've got to really do a lot of analysis and logic in meditation on this. So let's just use one or two logical reasons to try and break down this instinctive belief in the intrinsic, separate, inherent, absolute me, which is the root of all our suffering. So the best way, as I said, is to see it in the framework of the conventional realities, or the two truths, conventional and ultimate. Okay, so there's different levels at which things exist in dependence upon of dependent arising. And three of them are arguments with the prevailing views before him, Buddha. So the first one is that things exist in dependence upon causes. So don't forget that one. We've done that already with karma, really, about I. Now the next one is a very tasty one. This is the analysis we have to do. We believe, because of this ignorance in our mind, this particular delusion, we believe totally, 100%, 1,000,000%, totally. Okay, sorry, before I say that. The first level of dependent arising is that things exist in dependence upon causes. The second level, which we're going to discuss here, and this is more subtle, but it's not the subtlest, is that things exist in dependence upon their parts. And this is an argument with the prevailing view that there is an intrinsic Atman that is partless and uncaused. And Buddha says this is not viable. He goes along much philosophical discussion about that. So here we're going to look at how we try and prove how, because what this ignorance thinks is wrong. And what this ignorance causes us to think is that in here somewhere, among all the thousands of other parts, think about what we're made up of is body and mind, isn't it? And there are thousands of parts of the body, and there are thousands of parts of the mind. But we instinctively believe that there is in here somewhere very special part, walking hand in hand with all the other parts, as my friend Pende says. And that very special part is called me, I. Look at our language. We reinforce this every second. We say, I have a hand. I did this. I is the central player in our mind. I looms large, And Buddha's saying that we exaggerate. All delusions exaggerate the status of something. So this ego grasping exaggerates the very fundamental sense of I. We make it bigger than it is. So now, as soon as we hear the way of saying it ultimately, that from the side of here, these parts of Robina, from here, when you do the analysis, when you do the meditation, you're going to find there is not one atom of any I, there's no piece there called I. There can't be, and there doesn't need to be. So first we hear this as like a joke. What do you mean there's no I? Then we hear it, oh, well, there's no I, might as well kill myself. So we hear it as nihilism. We hear it as, and this is an utter mistake. That's the, as Tzong Khapa says, when we think of emptiness as meaning nothingness, which is how it sounds to us initially, it's like you fall into the abyss of the great mistake. And in all the literature over the centuries, it seems this is the easiest mistake to make. When we hear that there's no I existing from its own side here, when we hear there's no intrinsic I, there is no inherent I, there is no I existing from its own side, there's no independent I. These are all synonyms. When we hear that, we can't help but hear there is no I. And so we fall into the abyss of the great mistake. We fall into the nihilistic view. This is a mistake. This has gone too far. You've chucked the baby out with the bathwater. Now, then when we hear dependent arising, the Buddha says there is a thing, there is a thermos, there is a lamp, there is a computer, there is a Robina that does exist interdependently, dependent upon causes, dependent upon parts, dependent finally, which is the subtlest one, upon the mind labeling it that. These are the levels of dependent arising. So as soon as we hear there's no I from its own side, we go, oh, well, there's no I, might as well kill myself. And then we hear the Buddha says there is an I that does exist interdependently. We then over-exaggerate, and then we have the eternalistic view, aha, there must be something, and we go grasp. So we run like drunken sailors between these two extremes. There is something that does exist, or there's nothing that doesn't exist. So sort of like, Buddha, make up your mind, please. But what they're saying is the two truths. That when we begin to understand these properly, they don't contradict. We think they contradict each other. No, they reinforce. That in reality, the more we understand dependent arising, the more we know, it tells us that therefore there's no intrinsic I. And the more we understand emptiness of intrinsic I, the more we understand there's a dependent arising I. So these two actually reinforce each other. And it's not Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and all the gurus say, when you know that they each tell you the other, they're leading towards the middle way. Right now we have the two extreme views, and we go like crazy people between these two. We hear them as contradictory. We can't hear. It's so nuanced, you know. So when we begin to understand, even intellectually, that these two lead to each other. In other words, when we realize that dependent arising, that things exist interdependently, that tells you there is no independent I. When you realize there's no independent I, it tells you there is an interdependent I. So it takes us time, you know, to think this, to hear it through. And this is not just, of course it's intellectual. Everything's intellectual when you start. But then eventually when you practice it, it becomes experiential, doesn't it? But you've got to get the right words. If you have the wrong recipe for that cake, you can make it 1,000,000 times, you'll never get the cake. The recipe isn't the cake, but it leads you to the cake. Same here. Words lead you to the experience. Excuse me, let's have a drink. Okay, so let's do a little exercise. This exercise sounds very funny. We're going to go to IKEA and go shopping, okay? We're going to go and buy an amit. We're going to buy a shanti. We're going to go and buy an I, okay? It's a really good example, actually. Because when you do the analysis the Buddha says we have to do, he says you've got to search within all those parts. You've got to search for the piece called I. This is another way of doing it. So you look online, you see this gorgeous picture of shanti, you're going to go buy a shanti. Then you go and you get a box and you're very disappointed. There's 1,000,000 parts in there, right? It's a really good example though. It's a great example. So you go to, so let's just use the example. And you think of your own I here. You buy one of you. And you know you'll get a box full of thousands of parts, won't you? I mean, we're made of thousands of parts. And what's very interesting here, when you do the logical analysis in meditation of searching among those parts, for the I. This is one of the meditations you have to do. It sounds so silly to us. You've got to be very precise. You've got to know exactly what the parts are. So when you get a table from IKEA, they don't just chuck in 5 legs and 14 screws and you cross your fingers. They've made the table exactly with all the right parts, and they've deconstructed it and put them in together. So you know it'll all work beautifully. So the same with the I. There are millions of parts in there. And you'll gradually construct, Robina, you'll construct yourself. And you know there's exactly the right number of fingers, and there's all of this, and the ligaments, and the methods, and the atom, and this, and the bones, and the elbow, and the something, and the shoulder, and the clavicle, and the arm, and this, millions of parts of the body. And then you've got the millions of parts of your mind. You've got your anger, and your love, and your kindness, and your jealousy, your goodness, and your badness, and your virtue, your intelligence. Many, 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 many parts that make up I. There are many, many, many parts that make up your body and your mind that make up I. So we feel, we believe, we keep waiting among all these hundreds of parts. Where's the I? Where's the peace that without which there won't be an I? I mean, it sounds silly, but listen, we speak like that. One of the analysis we have to do, they say if something exists, it's got to be one or more than one. That's it. You can't have a choice. So if you're made up of 5 parts, one of those has to be, we think one is called the I, because we say that. Okay, we'll use a simple example. This is one way of looking at how things exist dependently. I'll tell you I have a mala. I'll make one statement. I have a mala and a thermos. Now, if you've got eyes that work, you know English, you hear me say that statement, you look over here, in 1 millisecond, you will prove I spoke the truth. And what have you got? How many phenomena? There is a mala, there is a person, Robina, I, it's a person, and there's a thermos. You counted 3 phenomena. This is so simple, don't miss the point. If I made a true statement, you would have to point out 3 phenomena that are separate, okay, from each other. And you can. It's very simple. And what's separate mean? It means they don't depend upon each other. If my mala breaks, my thermos is happy. It's fine. If Robina drops dead, the thermos works fine. The mala works fine. And that proves that there are 3 separate, independent, 3 different phenomena. That's an easy example. There are 3 phenomena. So that means you proved I made a true statement. It's a truth. I spoke the truth. And if I spoke the truth, you have to point out those 3. Now I'll make another statement, and now we're getting more nuanced. I have a nose and an ear. Now you can see straight away it's true. Without analysis, that I made a true statement, but we need to analyze. Why? Because Buddha says when we say that statement, we are over-exaggerating the status. Well, actually, of all of them, and we'll just talk about the I first. We're completely over-exaggerating the status of the phenomenon called I. And we are thinking that there is in here, like there is an ear that is not the nose, and like there is a nose that's not the ear, we also think there's an I that's not the nose and the ear. There's 3 phenomena: eye, nose, ear. Well, we can point out the ear. No problem, right? We can point out the nose. So now we have to point out the 3rd one, the eye. That's where it gets tricky, isn't it? Now we believe, I mean, the Muslims call it a soul, the Christians call it a soul, the Greeks call it an essence. We say in the West, we have a body and a mind and a spirit, and the Indians call it an Atman. Well, Buddha says, no, you don't, it's an embellishment. You don't need a separate piece. You don't need a separate, independent, different I. This is the gross example. He says you don't need one. And now let's look at why there can't be one. Well, first of all, if there is one, that's why Buddha says you've got to search. You will find it. In which case, everything's fine. But he says you won't find it. And there can't be an independent, separate I. Let me explain. If my ear gets sore, it hurts, which is one piece of me, the nose doesn't feel it, does it? The nose is still happy. The nose is kind of going, oh, poor ear, look at that. Poor ear's unhappy. The nose does not get affected if the ear stops, if the ear gets blocked. You go to the doctor, oh, I've got a pain. Where's your pain? Oh, it's in my ear. Well, then, the nose is still happy. This is not complicated. Like the mala and the thermos are not dependent. So forget the point, this is part of the same body. That's a different discussion. But on the face of it, ordinary life, nose and ear are separate, independent phenomena. We know the biggest system of the body all works together. That's not the issue. It's simple to say the ear's functioning. Oh, my battery's running out. I forgot to plug in. Excuse me. Sorry.
In the question round, you can use there's a menu button under participants. Okay.
Okay,
Afterwards.
okay, thank you. Okay, so now we say, like if Amit insults me and says, you know, if he's rude and he says, your nose is so ugly, Robina. This is the point now. If there were an intrinsic, separate, independent piece in here, labeled I, like in your box, there's labeled screws, there's labeled right thumb, left thumb, and there's another one labeled I, which we feel, our language expresses it. If there were a separate I, then when Amit insults my nose, but I'll say, how dare you insult me? He would rightly say, Robina, I didn't insult you, the piece called you. I insulted the piece called nose. So we feel there is an independent one, and our language expresses it. I have a nose. I am angry, you know. So there's two mistakes we make. Either there's a separate piece called I that is the owner of the other parts, without which you won't function, or we say the I is everything. And there's both of these we have to argue with. We're still arguing with the first one. So this is literally logical. If there were a separate piece called an I, you know, if you pull my ear, I don't say, leave my nose alone, because the nose and the ear are separate. Well, if there's another piece called I that's separate, it won't feel it either. So this is where it gets more difficult, because there is an I. Don't be nihilistic now. There is an I, and this is where it gets more subtle, more nuanced. There is an I, but only insofar as it is existing interdependently, only insofar as it is a name imputed. This is the subtlest meaning. I is the name imputed on that container of all the bits and pieces in the IKEA box. The thermos is only the name imputed on all the bits and pieces. So there is an I, but you can't point it out. It's not separate and independent. So in other words, there is an I that is not the ear and is not the nose, but you can't separate them. So they're different, but they're not separate. In the first lot, thermos, I, and mala, they're different and separate. It's a simple example. But here it's more nuanced. There is an I, but you can't separate it from the parts. But it's not the parts. And it's not meant to be clever, silly talk. This is literal. And we have to learn to understand this. So why also is the I not everything? Well, all of it's me. Well, that's just not viable. First, we have to establish something existing. We have to define it. So if I is a name we give to the combination of body and mind, I is the combination of body and mind. We give the name I to the combination of body and mind. Then you say, well, my I is my mind. Well, if your I is your mind, then they're synonymous. There's only one thing. If your I is the mind, it means I and mind are equal. It means I and mind are synonymous. That means they're the same. That means, why would you say I have a mind? It's so silly. The I cannot be the base. The I, the label, thermos cannot be the base of the parts. The thermos is made of parts. Thermos is a name we give to parts. Here's a part, the base. Thermos is a circular, a cylindrical, or a container with a base that holds my tea. So let's look for the intrinsic thermos. It's the same as the intrinsic I. We think there's a thermosness there somehow. But you look, where's the base? And this is the parts here, the metal part, the cylinder. Forget the lid. So you take the base away. We're looking for the thermos. So you're looking for the intrinsic thermos. You take the base away. You have a round piece of metal, and here you have a cylinder. You have two parts. You don't have a thermos there. There's no thermos. You can't find a third part called thermos. Where is it? And this is not the thermos, and that's not the thermos. So what's the thermos? It's a name we give to the parts. What's Robina? It's a name we give to the parts. We think there's a Robina in there running the show. We all say that. So when you look for all those parts, you're searching for the parts. In the parts, you're searching for the I. We're looking for the boss. We're looking for the piece that without which there wouldn't be a Robina. This Buddha says it's an elaboration. It's an elaboration. And it's the same philosophical view as thinking there's a creator. Buddha's not being rude. He says we can all become a Buddha. We'll all become an enlightened being. We can all become a superior being. But the job of a superior being is not to run the universe. We're not all coming from the same source. There's no view like that in Buddhism. It's an embellishment. So the view of a creator, this fundamental source, God or whatever, this source of everything else, is the same mistake as thinking as philosophically as there's an intrinsic I. We don't need an I. The parts do fine running the show. The parts do fine on their own. We don't need a separate piece called I. But that doesn't mean there's not an I. There is an I, but you can't point it out. There is an I that's contingent upon the parts. And that I is, finally, it's merely labeled. That's the essence of the teachings on emptiness. So I think 15 minutes, you've got some questions. Come on. We've hardly begun. We have to have another whole series just on emptiness. Shanti. It's not possible to do it in 10 minutes. Anyway, never mind. Are there any? Please, before we finish. So, okay, before you ask questions, doesn't matter. You think, what's the point of all this? It sounds so clever and intellectual. What is the consequence of this? This is the part that's the best. Buddha's telling us that the entirety of samsara, all the suffering, all the realms, all the happiness, all the dramas, all the constructs, all the husbands and wives and children and dogs and babies and good and bad and buildings, everything is construct from these delusions. And when the root of them all is this primordial ignorance that believes everything has an intrinsic existence. So when that's cut, you've cut samsara. You've got more work to do, but you can never fall back after that. And once you've cut the belief, because it's a belief, you don't cut the I, because it's never existed anyway. You cut the belief in the fantasy I. So in the first moment, in subtle concentration, when you're in samadhi and you're doing this analysis on dependent arising at a very subtle level, and for the first time you have a direct, non-conceptual insight into the fact that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that kind of I. That's when you realize emptiness. That's when you've cut the root. You have more work to do to finally become a Buddha, as well as achieve liberation. But from there on, you can't fall back. And as Lama Zopa says, when the greatest yogis have realized that, it's the most blissful, joyful experience in the universe. When they've realized the mistake. That there never has been, isn't, and never could be that kind of I. And then you realize dependent arising. His Holiness says, the I isn't empty of intrinsic existence because you can't find it, and you won't. That's not the real premise, he said. The I is empty of intrinsic existence because it's a dependent arising, and merely labeled is the subtlest dependent arising. You know, in Lama Zopa's book that we edited recently, that we put out as a fundraiser for the Liberation Prison Project. You can get it as a digital book as well. It's still online. I can send Shanti the link, and you can send it to the people, and you can buy it and raise us money for the prison project. You can give whatever you like. You give nothing if you want. You give $5, give $4,000, whatever you want. But we'll send the link to it. And this book is an incredible chapter on emptiness, an incredible chapter on attachment. It's Lama Zopa's letters that he's written over the years, but put into a kind of edited into a narrative as a wonderful book. It's an amazing book. I really recommend it. It's like a perfect lamrim book. It's incredible, but amazing chapter on emptiness and an amazing chapter on attachment. I highly recommend. I'll send the link to Shanti, and you send it to people, yeah? Shanti? Okay, yes, Amit, and yes, Karina. Please, your questions, one at a time. Yes.
I can go first, Venerable.
Good, Amit.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm sorry about my camera. I can't turn it on because I'm unwell. And
okay.
so I'm just choosing to keep the camera off. Thank you so much. Your sessions are very insightful, Robina. I thoroughly enjoy your sessions, and I'm looking forward to the next course on death in April, I guess, through Tushita Center.
Yes.
Thank you. Between now and then, can I have a 15 to 30 minutes personal counseling session with you?
I think, why don't you email me? I mean, of course, you email me about it. We can discuss. Absolutely.
Okay.
Put down, and you have my email. Put down your points and we can discuss. Absolutely. But But yes, and I can, yeah, we can do that. I mean, of course, absolutely, no problem.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yes, Karina. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Venerable Robina. I really enjoy listening and I learned so much from your teachings.
Good.
I appreciate it. I wanted to ask something that's always rattled around in my head when I hear teachings on emptiness, but I've never, I don't know, it's a bit of a difficult question. It sounds all very philosophical, but I'm interested in the kind of nitty-gritty of it. And my question is all conventional reality merely imputed by language?
Yes.
Oh.
Finally, as simple as it sounds, but it's obviously got more depth, but that is finally the subtlest meaning of dependent arising, which is the actual meaning that implies emptiness. That's the way Buddha says things do exist. There are causes, there are parts, and the subtlest one is things exist independent upon causes, which is the grossest level. Things exist independent upon their parts, which is the second subtle level, the next less gross level. The subtlest and the actual meaning that comes with the realization of emptiness is that they're imputed by the mind, that they're merely labeled. That's exactly right.
So, Venerable, my second question would be, if I can get a feel, a kind of an intellectual brain thing where I can kind of get that, I have never had the discipline to actually continue with shamatha, to have anything like any deeper understanding. And the question is there some way I can deepen my understanding?
Yes, I'm not much of a meditator, but I've learned this philosophy and I have to speak about it this last 30 years since Lama Zopa told me to teach. And every time I speak it, it goes a bit deeper. Every time I speak it, I get more clear. So, yeah, and that's intellectual. So don't underestimate the intellectual certainty. Part of our problem in our culture is we were so educated and we're so captivated by conceptual thoughts. We can easily mistake the conceptual thought for the realization, but on the other hand, don't chuck out conceptuality. Absolutely, it is an amazing stepping stone. So you need to study more the teaching, sweetheart. You need to engage in the courses. I mean, you just go on. There's so many available now. You know that, and there are incredible courses with all these marvelous teachers. Or just study it and read it yourself. I mean, Lamas, you can't wish for. I mean, I can recommend some books. I'm sure you know they're all there. But the intellectual pursuit of it, if you really practice every day. I'm assuming you have a practice. If you have a practice every day, now, okay, if you study it in the university only as a degree, it'll never happen. You need to sort of have the devotion. You need to have practice. You need to have purification practices and meritorious practices, visualization of the Buddha. Those like soften the mind. They put atomic bombs under the delusions that allow you, when you read the words, to hear them more tastily. I can say I've got a taste for these words. Until you get shamatha, you won't have the realization, but you don't just leap into that. You've got to go slowly, slowly. So there's plenty you can do, Karina. So pursue it, sweetheart. If you want this kind of, and my mind is the same, you absolutely pursue it. But you read good books and good things. You listen to the teachings, but you've got to have a sound daily practice, purification and merit. Do you understand? You get all that?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Keep moving, baby. Where do you live, Karina?
I live in the south of Spain. I'm Irish, but I've been in the south of Spain for a long, long time.
Okay.
And I go to Osaling.
Oh, okay, perfect.
And with Nagarjuna in Barcelona or Valencia, I do online courses.
Okay,
but if I could just add, I feel that I want to put myself into a situation where I can have exactly what you described, where I can have that. So I live on my own, and
it's a perfect opportunity. But there's so many teachers now these days, as you must know. Here you are in a course run by an Indian center. There's so many courses. Zoom has been this miracle now, making so much available to so many people. And you just look for the teachers you really like, but you do it in a progressive way. You do it, don't just random. And that's where we need the discipline. And you just keep studying and analyzing and doing the meditation every day. That is a perfect day of practice for you. You can't ask for more. It's perfect. But get the right teachers. Don't just float around and shop in 22 different variations of it. Focused and go deep into the system that works for you, the teachers that you know. There's so much published now. Everything is out there. It's there for us. The tools are there. Combined with your daily discipline practice, that is a perfect day. Keep moving.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good, darling. Hope to see you again somewhere. Good, Karina. Okay, people, this is it. I think it was the end, for God's sake. It's already gone already. We're finished.
Hello. So anyone else has a question? Or? Okay, Venerable Robina, it was really an honor to host you for Root Institute, and we hope you will teach us again, maybe on emptiness. I think the people would like that, maybe. So, and also thank you to all of you for participating. And thank you to the donors. We also have charitable projects in Root Institute, in addition to providing Dharma teachings. And we hope to open soon. Maybe in December, His Holiness will teach in Bodh Gaya. Then you all can visit.
That's very special.
Yeah, but His Holiness did mention that this winter maybe.
Wonderful. Let's hope. Let's pray.
Then you all can come to Bodh Gaya.
Yes,
Institute.
Love it. So we're just thinking, dedicate all this time we've been together, every moment of every thought we've had. This is what's very interesting in the Buddhism. I'll say it again. There's two things. One is the karmic process, which is more like qualitative, the way things are shown in the mind, experiences. But the fact is, as Geshe Tashi in London says, every second of the day, it's like we're shooting a movie all day. Nothing goes astray. Everything gets stored in the mind. That should be very consoling to us because it's there to be accessed. It's there in our memory, you know. And then we hear it again, it makes it more easy. And that's the point to Karina. The more you think, I mean, for me, Karina, just this staying these teachings all these years, having to say the words, studying them first, being accurate. Every time I say the words, I get a taste, a deep, and that's encouraging. That's the point. And eventually we get shamatha, and then the actual experience comes. But you don't just leap to that. It's a gradual process. The delightful thoughts we've had, all these seeds we planted, we think we're going to never give up nourishing these seeds with our practice from this moment forward. We will then culminate in our Buddhahood. How marvelous. So we really can be a benefit to others. And the other little prayer is just this one of bodhicitta. May it grow and grow in the hearts of all beings, you know. I'll just, I can't, my voice, I've got a funny thing. I'll just say them chanting. Kewadi nyududag lama sange drubgyone drowa chikyang malupa dei sala gopashog jangchob semchog rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyochik ke panyampa me payang gong ne gong du bavashog. Thank you, everybody. That's it. Done. Thank you, dear Shanti. So kind. Thank you, all you kind people.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Venerable.
Okay.
Venerable, if I can ask a question. I'm sorry I've come in late.
Yes, Monica.
Yes, yeah, I actually, the more I read and the more I listen and the more I meditate, I feel that the thought is the primary karma. And your thoughts actually are determine, I mean, ultimately, if we want to, move towards a spiritual life, our thoughts have to change and then our actions and words will automatically change.
Exactly, Monica.
Yeah, but how does one deal with the thoughts? How does one deal with it? I mean, because do you stop your thought? Do you change your thought? Or do you just observe it? And how do you just observe it?
A simple example, Monica. If you only know a little bit about how to make a cake and you've got wrong thoughts about cake making, that's possible, isn't it? That you don't understand the function of the eggs, you don't know what the flour does, but you've got some thoughts in your mind. You've got enough thoughts to know that you need eggs and flour. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And they are thoughts, aren't they? Right?
Yes.
So then hear a good cook tells you that they give you a good recipe. Now, the good recipe is also thoughts, isn't it?
Yes.
Would you agree with that? So
Yes.
how would you go from what's the process you'd have to go through from believing in the wrong thoughts to getting the right thoughts? What would you do? What's the process?
I would have to give up my wrong thoughts.
What would you do first?
And understand.
You listen to the right thoughts, and then you listen, and then you understand the logic of why the wrong thoughts are no good. You just don't make the thoughts go away. You don't wish they weren't there. You've got to use your intelligence. So you listen, by listening to the right thoughts, you then points out the mistake of your wrong thoughts, and you have this little discussion with yourself, don't you? And then you start to practice the right ones until eventually the wrong ones have gone completely. That's how you get rid of all the rubbish thoughts. But the difference, sweetheart, is the wrong recipes are called anger and attachment and jealousy and anxiety and confusion, and they're very, very, very old in our mind. So we can't just make them go away overnight. So the method is, if you like the Buddhist thoughts, and the Buddha's telling us, listen, guys, the thoughts you've got about reality now, about how to make happiness, not a cake, but how to get happiness, you've got the wrong thoughts. But they're very ancient, Monica. We can't expect them to go overnight. And the added part of the problem is they're very painful. We get a lot of pain, emotional pain from those thoughts. So what we've got to do is you read Buddha's thoughts. This is what I'm saying to Karina. Lama Zopa told me to teach Buddha's thoughts, if you like, 30 years ago. I try to do my job. I've studied it properly. I don't try to make up thoughts. I try to say Buddha's thoughts properly. So when I first began thinking about emptiness, I could say the words, Monica, but I didn't have a taste for them. I still have a grasping. So every time I have to say the words about emptiness, that is the right recipe, if you like. And every time that chips away at my other thoughts. And then slowly, slowly, that's how you get enlightened, sweetheart. So we've got to be patient and humble and live with the crazy thoughts, but don't believe them, sweetheart. That is a major step. And we have to learn not to be afraid of them, because that's where the pain is. And these thoughts are very deep and very knotted together. That's literally what practice is, Monica, which is why it's so important to have valid teachers and have confidence in the teachings you're reading and really go deep into them. And slowly, slowly, every time you read even, it'll chip away at the rubbish stuff. And then you go a little bit further. And then you have, but like I said to Karina, you got to add to that. It's not just being intellectual. You've got to have a good practice, a good meditation every day. Think of the Buddha, say a mantra, do a bit of purification. They kind of prime your mind to enable you to hear the thoughts better until one day you get the experience of the truth of them. This is practice, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Venerable.
You've got to be
Thank
humble, patient, and learn. But you see, that trouble is with meditation, we think it's to make all the thoughts go away because the pain is so bad. The pain of depression and anger is terrible. That's our problem, darling. That's why we get overwhelmed. But when we have the confidence to know they're only thoughts, and we learn first to hear them, you've got to not push them away. You've got to greet these, I think of them as my roommates. You've got to greet these crazy roommates, Monica. Don't be afraid of them. That's 90% of the problem. Listen to the crazy anger, listen to the anxiety, but then you learn, the first step is don't believe in them. This is a powerful step to take, sweetheart. This is an unbelievable step. It takes time. Are we communicating, Monica?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Everybody, thank you. That's a really good point you made. I'm very glad you asked it. It's hugely important. This is the essence of it. If we can have this courage, just to keep moving, reading the right thoughts, the Buddha, all these, have confidence. Don't squeeze them into your mind. Just listen to them. That'll help you argue with the other rubbish. And the more you listen to the positive ones, the right recipe, the other rubbish just goes away eventually. That's when we finally realize the truth. The truth is what makes the life go away. But don't be fundamental. Be very logical. Use your mind, use your intelligence. Think about it, taste it, and one step at a time. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.